Good evening, I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Prime News. Fasten your seatbelts. Huge breaking news and the biggest story in the country tonight. Trayvon Martin, the man who shot and killed him, George Zimmerman, no longer has representation.
I want to announce today, as of now, we are withdrawing as counsel for Mr. Zimmerman. We've lost contact with him. Up to this point, we've had contact every day. He's gone on his own. I'm not sure what he's doing or who he's talking to, but at this point, we're withdrawing as counsel. If he wants us to come back as counsel, he will contact us. We had contact as of, I believe, Sunday. In the last couple of days, he has not returned phone calls or text messages or emails, leading me to believe that I can't go forward speaking to the public about George Zimmerman in this case as representing him, because I've lost contact with him at this point.
Wow. They've lost contact with George Zimmerman. They never even met the guy. They spoke to him on the phone. But they say that's common down in Orlando. They do that with clients, maybe who come into town and then leave. Anyhow, I mean, George Zimmerman is facing such public scrutiny. You've got a special prosecutor appointed by the governor putting together the evidence, deciding whether or not he's going to be charged for killing another human being, and you don't return the phone calls? You don't return the text messages? You go rogue? Erik Fisher, psychologist, is also with me tonight. Erik, what do you think is going on with this guy? And he's in a position, right? He's in a real bad position. From my perspective, he put himself in that position by carrying that gun and pretending to be a police officer. That being said, what do you think is happening tonight? Why would this man not contact his own lawyers? Men who are skilled, men who are passionate, men who are good at what they do, who are representing him. Why would he not call them, but call the special prosecutor, call Sean Hannity? What do you think's going on inside his mind tonight?
Well, I think we're seeing a pattern of behaviors that you probably saw in the development of the whole situation with Trayvon, is not having met him or interviewed him or talked with him, but speculating on what I see. It seems like there might be an issue with some paranoid issues, that this is a person who perceives himself as a victim first. In the role that he's playing in his neighborhood watch, he's trying to take care of everybody and play a rescuer, and Trayvon becomes his suspected persecutor. But for people who play the victim a lot, and I call them chronic victims, it's always a matter of time till their rescuer becomes their persecutor. In other words, here he has his attorneys that are supposed to represent him and help him, but something happened and shifted, and he felt he needed to take control and handle his own case for him. So there's a lot of fear that goes on in there, and there's a lot of issues that he's probably not seeing very rationally right now.
Bob Fisher, criminal defense attorney down in Orlando, joins me tonight as well. Bob, what happens as a result of this, okay? This is a guy who's contacting the special prosecutor on his own, calling up Sean Hannity in some off-the-record conversation, right? What does this mean? How does this impact George Zimmerman, the fact that he all of a sudden doesn't want to contact the people who are representing him, the people who are trying to protect his interests?
I don't think he's made a wise decision. I tell people all the time when they ask me if I think they need counsel, my pat question to them is, if you broke your arm, would you try to set the break yourself? Of course not.
Mark James, do you think what's happening here, and this is just my interpretation, my opinion, folks, right? I think this guy was a wannabe cop, right? And that's why he got the license to carry the gun. That's why he's the neighborhood watch guy. That's why he's tailing people, calling police 46 times, right? Do you think he now is a wannabe lawyer? He thinks he can kind of represent his own interests. He can contact the prosecutor on his own. He can set up his own websites. He can give his own public statements. He can call up members of the media and do everything on his own because he's a wannabe lawyer?
Well, I think that the psychologist or the mental health expert you just previously had on before Bobby hit it on the head. I mean, this is a person whose self-image is obviously that he's one of the good guys. He's out there doing neighborhood watch, and he's wants to go into law enforcement and law school and everything else. He perceives himself as a good guy, and now much of the country has perceived him otherwise.
Welcome back to Prime News. The headline, Hal Erik, you saw him there, right? Great advocate, fantastic lawyer down in Central Florida. withdrawn as counsel of George Zimmerman. Why? Because Zimmerman not returning his calls. Zimmerman not calling his attorneys, but calling Sean Hannity, calling the prosecutor. How about that? You know, my client won't talk to me, but he'll talk to the prosecutor? Woo. So they've withdrawn his counsel, although they've kind of left an open door saying, George Zimmerman, if you want to call us, we'll take you back on, but you got to contact us and I guess rehire us. Erik Fisher, psychologist, is with me tonight. Erik, this case has taken on a magnitude that I don't think anyone could have imagined when it happened. The first night that I covered this story, not too many other people nationally were covering this story at all. I had Trayvon's parents on, and to me, the first thing I looked at was George Zimmerman, neighborhood watch guy who's carrying a gun, who gets a little overzealous, or a lot overzealous, and kills this unarmed teenager. And that really began. But now it's come to a whole different place. What does this do to George Zimmerman when we see all the other people who have come on board in this case and turned it into something much, much more than a shooting? I mean, this has become a national discussion. People are taking sides. Everybody knows the story. You go on social media, you post something about this, all of a sudden there's 4,000 responses to your comment. For George Zimmerman, though, who is in the middle of all this, but has never commented publicly, you know, in person, he's posted something on the web. What does this do to your psyche? What does this do to you mentally? That, and let me put on top of all that, the threats that were thrown out there to his life, the bounty that was put on his head by the new Black Panther Party.
Well, this is a good example of how people handle very quick fame, you know. And this has a lot more emotion than just somebody who reaches stardom fast. This is somebody who's infamous. So he's got all kinds of stressors that he's never been exposed to, but in some ways, this is what he wanted in playing that rescuer role, as I mentioned earlier. So clearly, it seems that he doesn't have all his faculties there is how he's handled things, and I would wonder, long term, are there some other issues that he had in grandiosity in terms of, if you looked at his website, using quotes from, you know, from famous people on his website to describe his race and things like that, that he's got some issues to address, and then you add on this additional stress, and you know, the media really feeds on this. You know, it's a subject for social change, which sometimes people are put in the middle of a position that becomes a great way for us all to look at changing in our culture and how we look at race and how we look at how we might profile people without realizing. A lot happens with us all subconsciously without realizing it. And what I hope comes from this is that this does start a meaningful discussion, and hopefully George could potentially become a part of that. However, I'm concerned in seeing his actions that he's really trying to over-control this because there's something else going on, and my concern is that he kind of may be lost for a bit psychologically through this.
Bob Fisher is with us, criminal defense attorney. Bob, you've already told us that this is a bad move, getting, you know, not contacting your attorneys and going rogue. But how about this? The way that this case has evolved into much, much more than what happened that night. Does that in some way help George Zimmerman to a certain extent, that you've got the public now taking sides? You know, you're either with Zimmerman or you're with Trayvon Martin, and people seem to be like kind of, you know, putting their feet in the ground and saying, you know, I'm on this side, I'm on that side. In any way, does that help him in this, if this thing ever goes to trial?
I don't necessarily believe it helps him. On the contrary, Vinny, I think it hurts him. He's obviously had death threats. He cannot leave his home as described by Hal Jurg. He can't get in a car, go down to see a psychologist, get some counseling, run to the 7-Eleven, get something to drink. Apparently, he's lost weight from what they indicated. I agree with Erik. I believe that the trauma that he's experiencing obviously has adversely impacted upon him. I hope he has or gains the wherewithal to secure counsel. This is a bad move for him to go without counsel.
Unbelievable developments tonight. George Zimmerman's attorneys withdrawing his counsel. George Zimmerman tonight is on his own. He has no attorney. Now, where is he? I know where he was today at 1:30. He was online posting a statement on his website. Let me read it to you. This is 1:30 today. I am attempting to respond to each and every one of my supporters personally. The support has been overwhelming in volume and strength. I thank you all and ask that you permit me the time to respond to each one of you personally. Once again, thank you. Sincerely, George Zimmerman. Erik Fisher, what do you think about the fact that he's going to take the time to personally respond to each and every one of his supporters?
Again, this is another sign of a rationality issue, of somebody, again, who's kind of, it seems almost in a grandiose place. He might be one really sincere, nice person in his own perception of himself, but he's made choices that tragically affected the life of somebody and is really tragically affecting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people right now, with everybody getting involved. So he's really got to find somebody who's grounded, who hopefully he can trust, who can kind of, reel him back in, to use the fish analogy, because my concern is he's going to continue down this path, and it's going to make things worse for him and potentially people around him.
All right, folks, if you're just joining us, the headline tonight is a big one in the Trayvon Martin shooting case. Then he will be arrested, so just relax. These things take time if you want them done right. Erik Fisher, psychologist, is with us tonight. In light of what we've heard about George Zimmerman not contacting his lawyers, going rogue here, do you think there's any danger of him being potentially suicidal?
Anything's possible. Again, this is a person who hasn't been groomed for this type of stress. This is somebody who's not in the media, doesn't often deal with these things. And like I've said, it seems like there are definitely some psychological issues in terms of his rationality. If he gets desperate enough or feel that his world is crumbling around him enough, that's definitely a risk that can't be ruled out, which is why he really needs to find somebody who he can talk to and who he can trust to really talk through some of these things and make sure he knows what his options are.
All right, Joey Jackson, Erik Fisher, Mike Brooks, Bob Fisher, Mark Nejame, Natisha Lance, everyone, thanks so much. And finally tonight, what will the special prosecutor do? We don't know tonight, right? She has access to all the evidence, and we don't. However, there's some evidence she should take with a huge grain of salt. Here's my point. George Zimmerman's words, his version of what happened, should not be taken at face value. I was a prosecutor. If we always took the word of the suspect, we would never, ever prosecute anyone. I mean, every day in jurisdictions from coast to coast, prosecutors discount, don't believe the words of people who shoot and kill unarmed people. If George Zimmerman wants someone to believe him, let's put him under oath in a courtroom, in front of a judge, in front of a jury, and we can figure out if we can believe his words. That's all for now. I'm Vinny Politan. Have a great night. Don't forget to hug the kids.